Hello, I'm Will Goldstein from the kingscourt.com, and I'm talking about the Divine Ancient Timeline. And the subject of this video is the purpose of the Divine Light Ancient Timeline. And so I'm just going to be looking at different parts of that timeline. I guess I gave an answer to that question to present. The purpose is to present an historical representation of the history of this planet from biblical accounts, archaeology, anthropology, philosophy, and legends. So, when we look back at the history of this world, there's some really crazy stuff that bring up a lot of questions. And the timeline explores a lot of those. So I'm just going to kind of go through some of those. First of all, some questions might be like, who is God? Is there a God? Who is God? Where did did he create? Were we created by God, or does evolution exist? The universe. Did he create it from speaking the universe into existence, or as Aristotle thought, has the universe always existed? Will the universe always exist? These are all basic questions that mankind has always tried to figure out, probably to some extent no avail, but we do it anyway. So I guess what I really like to do is kind of go back to some of the early parts of that timeline, because there's all kinds of crazy stuff, ancient legends. For example, there's, let's go back to the very beginning of the timeline. So you have a city, Eridu. Was Eridu 35, well, even before that or around that time, you have these, the Sumerian kings list. And there's these crazy numbers in there. I don't even know what to do with them, 28,000 years. Yeah, 28,000 years, some king reigned. So what do you do with that? And it gives you SARs, and what are SARs, and how many years is a SAR, but it depends on how you look at that. But if you go back, 3,500 BC, or you go out to 28,000 BC, it's crazy. But there is the Sumerian kings list, and then from the Sumerian kings list, you have these deities called the Anunnaki. And where did they come from? And all their legends about how they came from, rode their chariots, or those UFOs that came down to Earth. And the legends all about going looking for gold and exploring for gold and making us human slaves, and all these crazy legends. They all exist, and those are the Sumerian part of the Sumerian deities. And then, so you have all these kings, and you have these deities, and out of that eventually came, Abraham. For he was actually the last. He was called out of Ur, where the city of Ur, where the god and the moon god and the city of Ur was sin. Wow, isn't that a mystery? How we came up with the word sin, But he was called out away from sin. You can see why he's the father of righteousness, right? So, and you have all these crazy legends, and these Mesopotamian deities that I was just talking about. And then you have the stories of Atlantis, and Plato gives a story, accounts of Atlantis in Timaeus, and and he says it's 9,000 years before that, so maybe 11,000 BC. Well, how does that fit into the timeline? And then, where is it? It's between the Strait of Gibraltar and the Pillars of Hercules. basically it's sunk in the ocean. Is it really there? Or they're searching, trying to find it, and so all these crazy legends. And why did they get destroyed? How did they get destroyed? They were a super civilization. Well, how? There's all kinds of crazy stuff. I mean, some people believe they had technology the same as our technology. You know, so it's just wild stuff that's way back there that makes us ask all these crazy questions. And then you start thinking about the Egyptian pyramids and how all the rocks, stones were carried there. And with our technology, we can't even do some of that kind of stuff. And so it's very. The purpose of this video is really to ask all these questions of where is all this crazy stuff coming from? And anyway, so Plato gives his account in Timaeus of that. I guess it's between Asia and Libya, buried in the buried in the mud, I guess, down in the Atlantic Ocean. So all these things, and then and there's even thoughts of that Atlantis was destroyed by earthquakes, flood, fire, who knows. So how was it destroyed? Why was it destroyed? One of the accounts people say is their pride, and maybe, but they were also, some people call them the sons of light and darkness, and those are Essene, even Christian ideology and Hebrew ideology. That the sons of light and children of the light, children of darkness. And then you have this crazy stories of the Watchers and the giants and the Rephaim and the Nephilim, and then are the Nephilim the Titans and the Greek gods, and you have all these Greek gods, and then the sons of God coming down to Eden, and then when mankind was created, So mankind is created, and there's plural, made man in our image. Well, some people believe that, for example, Hauser, he's an author, believes that the sons of man, so that all these divine beings were there in the garden, okay, and we were created in the image of divine beings, okay. So so they were discussing amongst themselves, God and all these other sons of God, who eventually, basically, according to Hauser, abandoned God and looked at women and had sex with women, and then we have these giants, but there's historical evidence for the giants. And then when the Jews were going into Canaan, to Israel today, or Palestine, whatever you want to call it, they were going in there, and God called them to war against the Philistines, but when they were going in, there were all these Rephaim, and there were still some of them there, and they were huge. Og, I think, is one of them, and he was like, I don't know. How I can't remember how tall he was, but he was giant. So you have all these giants, and then there's even historical evidence for giants even in North America. So they're wandering the earth, all these giants. I mean, how much truth is there to those questions of, if there wasn't any truth and any fact to it, you could just brush it off. But when you start seeing that there's actually evidence for a lot of this stuff, it makes you wonder and ask a lot of questions. Again, that's what this video is about, asking all these questions. And what happened to the Watchers? So if you look in the story of the Book of Enoch, and then you give the account of the Watchers, and they're all in prison in the dungeon, and that's referred to in the Bible. They're locked up in a dungeon in pits of darkness, held for judgment in 2 Peter 2:4. So according to the book of Enoch, there was his name Azalea. I'm just doing this from memory. Was pleading, God forgive us, God forgive us, and these are supposedly immortals, and then in, what is it? I'm using my memory again. I think it's Psalm 8, maybe. The account of God taking away their immortality, as a judgment against them for how they were basically sent to look after mankind and to watch over us and assist us. And instead of doing that, they had sex with the beautiful women. So it's just a crazy world, and then the judgments of God. And so all this is kind of bringing to a conclusion, with this one particular video, is all this judgments that happened, Noah and the flood and the antediluvian period before the flood, and then after the flood, and the judgment because of the flood, and the dispersing of the Tower of Babel out into the world, and finally it all winds down to Abraham, and basically God had through the flood judged the world, and after that judge, and he started anew. Basically, a lot of people believe it was to get rid of the giants, and to create. It was a polluted humanity. So, in other words, it wasn't just humans; they were a hybrid. And so, if that's really the case, and there was a hybrid, then that's what the judgment was all about. So it's all this crazy stuff is happening today. So that should ask you some questions. When you hear all the stuff of people talking about the rapture, or the second coming of Christ, or the tribulation period coming, the judgment of God, and you look at our society today, and you see all the immorality that's happening. And yet, in the history of this planet, you have all these world religions and the Abraham religions and the Abraham Accord, and bringing all these Abraham religions together to bring unity. And if it's unity, where is the unity? And my message to you is, if you really look at all this, everything is leading up to what's a climax in the history of this world. And the ultimate question is Jesus Christ really the Son of God? Did he really come? Is he really going to come again? Is there going to be a rapture? Is he going to come and reign on the earth for 1,000 years, for the millennial kingdom? Is there really coming a kingdom of peace? Is the Antichrist going to come? Is that and if so, if all those things are going to happen, which is predicted, and there's a lot of evidence that that is going to happen, are all these religions leading towards Christ? I believe all religions are essentially leading toward Christ, and I believe that Christ is the Son of God. But I do believe that God did come to different parts of the world to bring them closer to the knowledge, and that all those religions eventually will lead to the final acknowledgement that Jesus Christ is exactly who he said he is, the Son of God, and he is coming, and he's the King of Kings, and he will reign on this earth for 1,000 years. And there's going to be some bad news happening here before that happens. So the big question is, are you ready for that? Are you ready? So if there's going to be a rapture, will you be raptured? Or will you not be raptured? Have you always just thought it was a bunch of hocus pocus, some big joke? Okay? And all this, they've always said this over and over and over again. They've been saying this for, hundreds of years. For 2,000 years, they've been saying Jesus is going to come back, which, hey, there's some truth in that, Paul thought there was a good chance that Jesus might come back while he was alive. Well, a lot of the evidence is out today, and when the state of Israel was created, that began the timeline. And the timeline is that this generation, according to Jesus, will not pass away until all these things are fulfilled. And that was in 1948. What is a generation? 70 to 80 years. Are you ready? Because Jesus, I believe, is coming, and I believe before that the rapture will happen. And I hope you're there, because I plan on being there myself. Goodbye.